The Lord goes full Cobra Kai and sweeps the leg on our sinful nature. Shalom, I'm the Messianic Torah dude, and this week's Torah portion is Tetze. Tetze, or when you go out, comes to us from Deuteronomy chapter 21, verse 10, through 25, verse 19. And this week's Torah portion begins with a couple of commandments that are related to some things in the past that we like to kind of gloss over. We forget that when we read the Torah, this is a book that was written thousands of years ago. And because it was written those thousands of years ago, oftentimes the things that we see are starting people on a journey to a place where they need to be. And as we read the Torah, one of the things that we can take away from that is that we have a journey towards closeness with the Lord that is begun each time we open it. But more than that, we can remind ourselves of how far we've come. And as we look at some of these kind of more uncomfortable things that were going on in the world at the time the Torah was written, we see how the Lord's strategy in dealing with this, rather than saying, let's radically change the way things are done, was to sort of cut the legs out from under these sinful desires and these wicked things that were essentially a part of the world that they lived in. And the idea behind this kind of reminds me of if you've ever tried to remove vines that are growing up on the side of a building or something like that. One of the easiest ways to do that is to cut the roots of those vines, let them die, and then they're much easier to remove because they're not grabbing on as much to the structure of the building or whatever. And here what the Lord is doing is giving us commandments that are designed to sort of cut the roots of sinful nature that has been able to take hold and really grab on to the way the world was. So let's look at the first one in Deuteronomy chapter 21, verses 10 through 14. When you go out to war against your enemies, and the Lord your God gives them into your hand, and you take them captive, and you see among the captives a beautiful woman, and you desire to take her to be your wife, and you bring her home to your house, she shall shave her head and pare her nails, and she shall take off the clothes in which she was captured, and shall remain in your house, and lament her father and her mother a full month. After that you may go into her and be her husband, and she shall be your wife. But if you no longer delight in her, you shall let her go where she wants. But you shall not sell her for money, nor shall you treat her as a slave, since you have humiliated her. One of the uncomfortable truths of life, of the world, of this fallen world that we live in, is the connection between war and rape. In a lot of war-torn parts of the world right now, rape is used as a weapon. It's epidemic. Even civilized, modern societies, we find examples of that happening. But here what the Lord is saying is, instead of doing that, what the person has to do is first give the woman that would be the victim 30 days to mourn their family. And hopefully after that 30 days, the person will come to their senses. But more than that, this isn't just assaulting someone and then leaving them. This is saying you have to take them as a wife. You have to care for them. Give them all of the rights of a wife. This person who could have been just another casualty of war, just a casualty in a different way, would now have this opportunity at a new life. The Lord is essentially cutting the legs under this desire to seize women as property. And this was a practice that was so common during that time that when this commandment was given, it was revolutionary. It's weird for us to think of this sort of forceful taking of war brides as a revolutionary thing, but that's because we've lived in a society that's had these roots cut out for so long that we're able to reap the benefits. And that's one of the things that this Torah portion teaches us. Because we look back at some of these practices and we think how barbaric and how bad they are. But that's because of the groundwork that has been laid. The vines of these vile behaviors that these commandments seek to undercut have died and have loosened their grip on society. And yet when we look in some third world countries, or when we look in countries that by our standards are very backwards, have not been influenced by Judeo-Christian values, we see that these kind of practices are common or even encouraged, even today. You look at what's going on in places like the Congo and things like that, and you see these kind of actions still taking place. But let's continue. In verse 21, 15 through 17, it says, "If a man has two wives, one loved and the other unloved, and both the loved and the unloved have borne him children, and if the firstborn son belongs to the unloved, then on the day that he assigns his possessions as an inheritance to his son, he may not treat the son of the loved as the firstborn in preference to the son of the unloved, who is the firstborn. But he shall acknowledge the firstborn, the son of the unloved, by giving him a double portion of all that he has, for he is the firstfruits of his strength. The right of the firstborn are his." Again, we have a practice that was common in the days when the Lord gave the Torah to the people, and in the days when Moses was repeating these commands to the people. And yet here what we see is the Lord is taking this practice that even by today's standards is very barbaric, and adding mercy, undercutting this tendency to show favoritism, to show preference. And it's, in a way, it's sort of even undercutting the idea of having multiple wives, because both have to be treated equally. Chapter 21, verses 22 through 23, give us another example of the Lord adding mercy to a very negative thing. "And if a man has committed a crime punishable by death, and he is put to death, and you hang him on a tree, his body shall not remain all night on the tree, but you shall bury him the same day, for a hanged man is cursed by God. You shall not defile your land that the Lord your God is giving you for an inheritance." Here we see acknowledgement of the fact that because we live in a fallen world, people will commit crimes that warrant execution, that warrant death. And yet, even when somebody has done something so horrific that they need to be put to death, that person's life still has value because that person was created in the image of God. That person still has basic human dignity. It's easy for us to say, well, this person has done something bad, and be so overtaken by our desire for vengeance that we forget that mercy is just as much a part of justice as punishment. Part of the Lord's wisdom and part of the beauty of the Torah is the fact that it is rooted in this understanding of what human nature is like. This understanding that we have negative desires. We have desires to do the wrong thing. But the Lord attacks these wicked desires of ours by cutting the legs out from under them. To quote one of the greatest movies of all time, The Karate Kid, sweep the leg. So what are some other ways the Lord undercuts our wicked desires? Let me know in the comments. And we didn't have a lot of jokes, but I still like getting likes, so feel free to give this video a like. And if you learned something, give us a share. I'm the Messianic Torah dude. Shalom, and stay in the Word.